Well, how about poverty around the world? Is that the fault of the free market? Is that the fault of you and me, of us being free? Well, in fact, this is the century, the 21st century and the 20th century combined. These are the centuries where we've started to see, after some years of third way central planning, we started to see in the mid-20th century, but starting really in the 80s, a lot of liberalization of the good sort around the world. And what did we see? Poverty fell dramatically. Absolute poverty amounted to 85% of the world population in 1820. By 1950, that was down to 50%. By the early 1980s, down to 33%. And by 2001, down to 18%. The world has never seen that amount of poverty alleviation ever. Ever. At the very time that markets are opening up. Never seen any progress like this. Do we read that in the newspaper? Hey, great news, everybody. The New York Times. Hey, great news. Look, poverty is really... No, nothing. Nothing. We're led to believe that the poor are poor because the rich took all their stuff. When did these poor people have all that stuff, for one thing? I mean, this is... Or the poor get poorer, the rich get richer. This can't possibly... The poor... At some point, you hit subsistence level. If you get any poor, I mean, the phrase doesn't even make sense. But exactly the opposite is the truth. Now, governments did try to help people. We had foreign aid programs in the 20th century. And everybody, all the experts said the foreign aid programs are indispensable to lifting these people out of poverty. What did these foreign aid programs do? They kept these people in poverty. In case after case after case. There is almost nothing in the history of mankind that has a worse record than Western governments and their state-led development schemes. Absolutely appalling. It led to retrogression, not progress. This was the attempt of governments to help. When they stopped helping, things got a lot better. When Chile had foreign aid cut off, when South Korea had foreign aid cut off, or Hong Kong, these places flourished. Because no longer could their crummy statist policies be subsidized. They have to adopt the free market. The result was fantastic prosperity. Well, how about domestically? How about in the United States? Surely government got rid of poverty in the U.S. Where would we be without our overlords here, right? We'd all be impoverished, earning 2 cents an hour, digging in a ditch somewhere. Well, it turns out that in the U.S., if we look at modern standards of what constitutes poverty, in the year 1900, poverty claimed 95% of the population. By the late 1960s, that was all the way down to 12 to 14%. The amount of anti-poverty federal initiative during that time is so negligible as not to be worth talking about. And yet, poverty fell dramatically during that time. Then the government really got involved. The late 60s is when the Great Society programs really started to get funding. Then the government got involved. Then what happened to poverty? So it had been coming down like this. Then what happened? Then it stagnates. Now, we can talk about what the reasons for that would be, why these programs are counterproductive, and again, in some of my books I've talked about that. But the point is, there is this brute fact of the poverty rate going like this, and then the government gets involved and it goes like this. Now, suppose the situation had been reversed. Suppose the government was spending a lot on poverty all these years, and then we saw poverty fall. And then the government, because evil libertarians got in charge, the government stopped spending money on it, and then poverty leveled off. You know what we would hear. Well, this just goes to show government spending is what alleviates poverty. And if we get rid of the government spending, then it stagnates. But exactly the opposite is the truth. So what do we hear in the headlines or in textbooks? Nothing. Crickets. Nothing at all. No acknowledgement of this whatsoever. And the domestic analog to foreign aid has been the welfare state. And the welfare state has corresponded with a stagnation in the poverty rate, the same way that foreign aid to other countries responded in the same way. Well, wouldn't the free market, we're taught in school, if we have what you people are calling for, I mean, it sounds nice when you talk about it, but really it's going to lead to monopolies. It's going to lead to wicked people, short little people with white mustaches carrying sacks of money with dollar signs on them running around. They're going to be running the economy. And that's what you libertarians want. You love corporations, man. Well, okay, for one thing, if we love corporations so much, how come they don't donate to us? Okay? There are some corporations that would rather see the whole world burn to the ground than have a free market. But in fact, this whole free market yields monopolies thing, first of all, it comes in part from what we learned in junior high school. Because I remember when I was in junior high school, I just couldn't believe how anyone could support the market economy. I couldn't understand this. It leads to these monopolists who dominate, who have the economy by the throat, and only our progressive leaders could possibly emancipate us from this terrible serfdom and all that. But when you actually look at it, it's true. You have some really predatory entrepreneurs who are using their political connections to get them special benefits, tariffs that protect them from competition and whatever. But when you look at people who didn't do that, you actually have people I don't see why I'm supposed to despise. Why am I supposed to despise Cornelius Vanderbilt, for example? This is a guy who, before he get into railroads later in his career, he's a guy who defied the government's steamboat monopoly in the New York area. And then when the monopoly was overturned, he competed with existing steamboat companies. And he would say, well, you want to go from A to B? It used to be $3 a trip, now it's 10 cents a trip on my boat. Or on some trips, he would say, it costs you nothing. You can ride for free, but I hope you're hungry because I'll make money selling you food. This was an astonishing contribution to the world. Or then he used his railroad to transport mail. And he's transporting mail across the country. And he's competing against a subsidized railroad line. He's getting government money, and he's still doing it for a quarter of the rate. And the subsidized line goes out of business, and he prospers. Why am I supposed to dislike a benefactor of mankind like this? Why am I taught that this is the wicked person, but the great, wise, benign, benevolent people are these U.S. presidents whose faces look down upon me from the top of the classroom wall? Why is that? Well, it's a rhetorical question. So, of course, we talk about Andrew Carnegie. Single-handedly, the guy reduces the price of steel rails in a quarter century from $160 a ton to $17 a ton. I'm supposed to hate that guy? Now, Rockefeller, okay, you could talk about the things his foundation did, whatever. That's a separate question. I'm talking about as an entrepreneur. I mean, this is a guy who takes the price of kerosene and drops it from $1 to 10 cents. Now, the government can't ever do anything like this. This improves everybody's standard of living. Because now everything that uses that as an input gets cheaper. Everything that uses steel as an input gets cheaper. People's standard of living rises across the board. All the government can do is take stuff from some people and give it to you. And that is, not only is that a wash, it's a dead weight loss because of the inefficiencies and everything else involved. But these people actually did improve people's standard of living. And this goes on today, and we are taught to despise people who are involved in commerce. We're taught to be total jerks to store clerks, for example. You treat store, and I say you, present company accepted, but we're taught to treat store clerks like garbage. You know, like there's one tiny thread wrong on your clothes, and I mean, you are going to make hell over this thing. Whereas the TSA is sticking their hands down your pants, and you're going, well, you do what you got to do, man. Like, there's something wrong here, right? I mean, people have got to be schooled to think this way, because that is not a normal reaction to this. Also, okay, so then the claim is, but we do have monopolists, and then they take over, and then they can drive their competitors out of business. They just make their prices super low, nobody compete with them, they drive everybody out of business. It's called predatory pricing. Again, I've talked about that in some books. I have an article coming out on this from the Future of Freedom Foundation in a little while. But for now, I'll just say that there's almost no evidence of this ever actually happening. There are firms that drive other firms out of business, yes, but that's consumers drive those firms out of business, not the firm, really. But where's the suddenly high prices that they're supposed to then impose on the rest of us? They never materialize. And there are a whole lot of reasons for that. There are a whole lot of reasons that predatory pricing is a counterproductive strategy. And there are a whole lot of ways, market mechanisms, that even if that were possible, that could fight against that. But as I say, I've got an article coming out on this, and I have so much else to say. I'll put that as a